before the Velvets, before the Shags, even before Frank Zappa, there was one band that came first. The original freak out band. The lords of the underground. The godfathers of Gonzo. They eat pussy, they ain't fussy, they're the Fugs. Hey everyone, my name is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records, episode number 22, and today we are talking about the Fugs, specifically the Fugs in 1965. And we will be talking about this album and the many, many, many songs they recorded beyond this album in that fine year. So, the Fugs, really, really, really simple. First of all, I will just say this is the 1993 CD reissue. Over on the other side of the camera is a box set. I will be primarily referring to these two things. Oh, and I have a CD copy of Virgin Fugs that I'll be bringing over eventually. But I have never... No, that's not true. The first album, I did own a copy of it one time. I bought a totally obliterated, shredded copy of it for like $20. It was either $20 or $40. It was an increment of... it was an even number increment, but I think I gave it. I want to say that I gave it away to somebody because it was just basically unplayable. So that's the only time I've ever seen a copy of the first album, and like I said, it was basically unplayable. I don't know that I ever played it because the vinyl was so screwed up and like scratched. I mean, just long needle marks all over the place on it. So so this is the CD that I would have purchased in 1995. So this is the 1993 CD reissue that has all of the bonus tracks. I had a friend in high school who was reading a book about underground rock bands of the 60s, and I remember seeing it in the cafeteria one day. He had it open to a chapter the chapter was titled Fuggin' Around, and I was like, what is that? He was like telling me about this band, and then I don't know how he found this. I don't know where, because he was not a record collector person like myself, but somehow he found a copy of this thing, and I borrowed it immediately. This was very much right up the alley of the 1995 version of Rich. So I fell in love with this, and over the years I slowly accumulated the rest of their catalog. The pre-internet, it was hard to know what you were purchasing, and you didn't really know what was what, and the records were very, very, very hard to find. So other than the chewed up copy of the first album, the only other time I've ever seen a vinyl copy of an album was I got a copy of Tenderness Junction, which was also just pretty obliterated. Not as bad, and I still have it somewhere, but again, it's more or less unplayable. And then I want to say there's a record store that I referenced in one of my previous videos that I said that their prices are insanely inflated. And I want to say they had a copy of either Golden Filth or the Bella Avenue A. But it was something, it was some ungodly, like $170 or some crazy, maybe even more than that, who knows. So I don't have anything wild or all that interesting. Though this stuff, most of this stuff does appear to be out of print now. So this first album came out in 1965 on the Folkways label. It was then reissued the next year on ESP. It's come out the first name I always forget, so I'm reading it out of the liner notes. The first time it was issued in '65 on Folkways was the Village Fugs, Ballads of Contemporary Protest, Points of View, and General Disaffection. It was then put out, re-released the next year. I think they swapped out one take with an alternate take. And that was put out on ESP, and that was known as the Village Fugs, and then eventually it just became known as the Fugs' first album. So you can find there is some guy who put all of this with all the bonus tracks up on YouTube, so this is findable. But again, I don't the one problem with the streaming era and then people going back to vinyl records is it has the phenomenon of supplementary material has dried up again. And where for people like me who really love a lot of that stuff, it's really frustrating then poking around trying to find those songs or trying to find the version of the song. So, I mean, for one of the many reasons I stick with physical media, and I've never really gone that far into the streaming world, is because I can listen to this anytime I want. So the Fugs are a fascinating, pioneering band, pretty unprecedented, and I mean, they really do. They predate everybody. I mean, any freak out band of the '60s that you want to think of, like the Silver Apples or the Gods or the Red Crayola or any of that stuff, they predate all of it. And they formed in late '64. And Ed Sanders was the owner of P-Side Bookstore. He was also the publisher of I guess what you would call a zine called "Fuck You, a Magazine of the Arts," which is an amazing name. Yeah, I mean, "Fuck You, a Magazine of the Arts" is about as good as it gets, right? And so anyway, he Tuli Kupferberg. So P-Side Bookstore was a former kosher deli, and Tuli lived in either a building next door or above. I don't remember. But Tuli was a fairly legendary figure in New York. He would have been, how old would he have been? He would have been 40, like 41 or 42 when the Fugs formed. So, he would have been 42 by the time the first album came out. So he was already much older. And it's always interesting to see the perspectives of the guys who came a little bit more out of the 50s. Like, that's one of the things I was always interested in, the differences between, like a Syd Barrett or a Neil Young, let's say, to like a Ray Manzarek, who was a little bit older, or even a Yoko Ono, somebody, or even an Andy Warhol, I guess, somebody who was a little older and had, and had been a little older in the 50s, so they were living in that milieu for longer and were more aware of what was going on. So, and the sort of the post-war button-down sort of culture. So it's always interesting to see how those people exploded, and the original beats, which obviously the Fugs were hugely informed by. So Tuli is it in Howl or is it in Kaddish? I'm now forgetting. But Tuli is referenced in either one of those poems. I'm forgetting now. Because the legend was that he had, and it is true, he apparently had jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge and survived. So he was a published poet, and an excellent one. I will just throw in right now. Tuli was a cable access mainstay in New York. He lived, I want to say he died in 2010, I think. So he was 80 something, 82 maybe, no, 80, somewhere in there. So but I think he at least made it to 80. I'll cautiously say that. And he was very so there's a YouTube channel that has that might be run by his widow, maybe, but it is there is a vast trove of Tuli reading poems, pontificating, interviewing people, all sorts of stuff. So experimental stuff. So he has been his later years are very, very well preserved out there on the interwebs, and I'll link to that below if you're curious about checking that out. But anyway, Ed Sanders and Tuli decided to form a band. This would have been just after the start of the British invasion. The Beats, of course, like Allen Ginsberg was a huge Beatles fan, so I think that they liked rock and roll, and they got into rock and roll. There was already the folk scene. Dylan had already very much broken out by that point. So and then like you have all the Warhol stuff, and you have the Fluxus movement and Dadaism. So it is a buzzing hive of a subculture at that point in New York. And the Fugs are sort of, Sanders and Kupferberg are sort of smack dab in the center of it. The tripod of the Fugs, the three figures of the Fugs, there was a guy who had been in the Air Force from Texas named Ken Weaver. Ken Weaver, I guess, had been corresponding with Tuli, and at some point turned up in New York, and he became the sort of the third leg of the band, the third member of the band. So and became the drummer. So you have the three songwriting voices of the Fugs, and the three mainstays of the Fugs are a fascinating range. All the way on one end, you have Weaver, who had been in the Air Force, is probably the closest thing to a centrist, though not really, but close enough. The most musically skilled, and the most how do I phrase it? The one who would go for the sexual hijinks and sort of gross out humor, the sort of locker room kind of, or even Mad Magazine kind of stuff. The least confrontational, the least politically confrontational would be Weaver. So he would be on one end. Dead smack dab in the middle, you would have Ed Sanders. Ed Sanders, on the one hand, is responsible for a lot of the chaos and a lot of the confrontation and a lot of the freakouts. But especially as the band went along, it was Ed Sanders who wanted them to play with real musicians and be a real band, and like Sanders sort of guided them into having like a career in the music industry. So he's sort of, he has one foot in the avant-garde or in the counterculture or subculture, but then he wanted to reach people, and he wanted to reach people like on their own terms, on conventional terms. So as far as he could do gross out, they could all three could do gross out. But again, there tended to be more of a point, like a sort of a social point that he was trying to make. And Sanders, I would say politically, is probably a liberal the same way like Jello Biafra is a liberal, or I would even throw in probably the same way that I am a liberal. Sort of classically liberal, left-leaning in most cases, mostly, largely, or overall, whatever, pacifist. But and not particularly sold, but still kind of nominally working within like the American democratic system, and I would say capitalism, probably regulated capitalism would be the preferred model, I guess, if he had his way. So, so that's Sanders. And then all the way over here, you have Tuli Kupferberg. So Tuli didn't play any instruments, had no interest, or appeared to have no interest in learning any. Kind of purely an agent of chaos, had the least conventional singing voice. Ed Sanders didn't really have much of a singing voice, but would try, and became a good singer over time. Tuli was just Tuli, period, forevermore. What he was in 1965 is what he carried on being. And Tuli, like, you know, dyed-in-the-wool Marxist, like, total, like, classically, like, all the way left-wing, all, like, totally coming out of the post-war thing, and I would imagine most of his politics would have been shaped by being in his 20s and 30s and the late 40s, early 50s. So Tuli is just an absolutely fascinating figure in a lot of ways. There are some things with Tuli that I wildly disagree with. He has a song, one of his later songs, "Art for Art's Sake." I absolutely disagree with the points that he's making on that. But you know, first of all, I think the idea that we all have to agree on everything is idiotic. I can entertain different points of view, and that's the other thing. Like, you know, I talked about this in another video. It's not about, like, you being pleased necessarily, and it's also really not about having ideas presented to you that you already agree with. It's not about, you know, art should never just be endless confirmation bias, you know. So I'm very much against that. So yes, I disagree with him here and there, and yes, sometimes I kind of like, you know. But that's the point, you know. And everybody's supposed to get their say, you know. And I think that Tuli's communism, I understand more than some of the people out there right now, right? Their you know, genius is a myth and all of that, like, you know, the sort of endless intellectual jack-off stuff. I think Tuli's was probably more born out of a drive to some sort of utopian vision, and utopian vision is something I can kind of get on board with. It's the but, you know, as John Lennon said, we'd all love to see the plan. So, you know, I'm not put off by Tuli's more radical left stuff, because I think in his case it's ultimately coming from a truly, like, humanitarian place. And I you know, while with the genius as a myth people, you see endless contempt. They're all about the people, but they just have endless contempt for people. Tuli, I want to say was more of a lover of people, and I don't think that he had contempt for kind of whatever regular people. The other thing about Tuli and Sanders, not so much Weaver, but one of the big things for me, and one of the big selling points for me with the band that I'm a really, really big fan of, is I love that they are tied into literary tradition, intellectual tradition, artistic traditions. They are locked in with this stuff. They are not book burners. And to put it in modern parlance, they are not cancelers of things. They are open to ideas, open to experience, open to expression. And so even if I don't agree with them, and that's the other thing, Tuli's gross out shit is like the grossest of the gross out shit. So, so that's the other thing. When he goes gross out, he goes like, like level gross out, right? So, you know, again though, I believe that great art can take the hit for its worst excesses and I can ride that stuff out, So anyway, the Fugs, 1964, formed. It was originally, I don't remember if Weaver was in. They had a poet named Szabo, and yes, and then Al Fowler, who was another poet, and apparently Szabo and Fowler came and went before they had a chance to record anything or record any of their songs. Ed Sanders laments that in here, saying that that they had quite good songs. Szabo apparently had a song called "I'm a Sociopath" that he really liked. One of the interesting things before they recorded anything or before they started playing shows, Tuli and Sanders had the idea to write between the two of them, write between 50 and 60 songs. Sanders, I want to say, used guitar to some degree to write. Tuli, speaking of Jello Biafra, pioneered the phenomenon of singing melodies into a reel-to-reel as his composing tool. So there are, this video is going to be a two-parter. In the next video, I will talk about, there are two different releases of Tuli's a cappella songwriting session tapes that are really, really cool. So, and I love that stuff. I really wish they had kind of gone in that direction because that was really cool. So at any rate, the sense of tradition and the sense of bringing forward ideas, I love that, and especially with Tuli, because Tuli, older than anybody else in rock music, and was not only had like his weird classicist Marxist stuff, but the thing that I find really interesting about Tuli is he was deeply enmeshed in his Jewish upbringing. So there's a lot of Hebrew, like sort of, what do you call it? Canto singing, is that right? That's wrong, but the cantillations, I forget the terminology, but there's a lot of Yiddish, there's a lot of Jewish cultural references, and there's just the sense of ancientness. Like Tuli just feels so out of time, and it feels like he's somehow broadcasting from like the 1880s or something. So that I really, really love. And I really love that he was able to do that and then like write lyrics that were shocking and provocative for the mid-60s. Actually shocking and provocative now, because some of this stuff, they would be, the stereo bubblegum sites and Fitchborks would be up in arms if they got hold of some of Tuli's lyrics. So even now, so I love that sense of timelessness, that bringing forth ancient traditions and bringing forward stuff specific to your cultural upbringing, all of that. That's all really cool for me. I've always been really fascinated by, and I'll be honest about this, I've always been fascinated by Jewish culture. The idea that there is stuff that's sort of handed down, like I didn't have any sense of that as a kid, and growing up, while we were initially lower middle class, there were a lot of waspy aspirations. So I've always loved that, like some of those aspects of Jewish culture, like and Tuli is just locked into it in such an interesting way. So and that was one of the things I gravitated to when before I even really was getting, or when I was just getting serious about music, and I got really into Lenny Bruce. That was part of what I found fascinating about Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce was another guy who felt a little out of time, too modern for the current world, but he also was bringing forward all these references and and traditions and rituals that that I had no frame of reference for. So I just think that stuff is really, really cool. So and Lenny Bruce and Tuli really went for it in ways that, let's say, Bob Dylan or Lou Reed didn't. So I've always really liked that about them. So let's get into it, shall we? So I actually have a printout here, because these songs, Jesus Christ, these songs are split out over several releases. So there's this album, there's the bonus tracks, there's what's on the box set, there's what's on Virgin Fugs, and then there's what's on a inexplicable mid-70s compilation called Fugs 4 Rounders Score, which I do not have a copy of, never seen a copy of, and I don't know that I want to go and get a copy of, quite honestly. So there's a lot of repeating of stuff and doubling up, and then there's songs that are only like on one release. So it's a little bit of a minefield, but I am actually going to read through the Fugs' first recording session, which was, forgive me, the Fugs' first session was Ed Sanders and Tuli on vocals. They had gotten Steve Weber and Pete, Steve Weber on guitar, and Pete Stampfel. Pete Stampfel, definitely, of the Holy Modal Rounders. I think Steve Weber was at the time also with the Holy Modal Rounders. We got Ken Weaver on vocals and congas. And Stampfel is not just singing but playing fiddle and harmonica. So they were recorded. So this would have been for Folkways, and this first recording session was produced by none other than Harry Smith, the alchemist, archivist, poet, and avant-garde raconteur. So these are the songs recorded on that day in Greenwich Village in New York in April of '65. The two versions of the new Amphetamine Shriek, Saran Wrap, Hallucination Whores, Coca-Cola Douche, and My Bed Is Getting Crowded. All that stuff is on the Virgin Fugs release. We'll get to that eventually. What came out on Fugs 4 Rounder Score. Let's see. There was also Kakaraka. But Fugs 4 Rounder Score. Jack Off Blues, Romping Through the Swamp, Crowley Waltz, Fiddler a Dram, Fishing Blues, and then the second take of New Amphetamine Shriek. On the box set, we've got I'm Gonna Kill Myself Over Your Dead Body, Sunflower, Weary of Time, and the early version of Supergirl. And then bonus tracks on the CD reissue were We're the Fugs, Defeated, The Ten Commandments, CIA Man, the Audio Verite in the middle of the first recording session. They signed the worst recording contract since Leadbelly. I think that's the full name. And then we've three songs actually made the album proper, and that is the Swinburne Stomp, My Baby Done Left Me, and Nothing. So that is the first recording session. And I'm going to talk about the first album as an album, and then we're going to go through and cover all these other songs. Now, Pete Stampfel left. He was barely ever in the band, is my understanding. And then on September the 22nd of 1965, again with Harry Smith recording them, we have the lineup of Ed Sanders. Oh, by the way, the lineup changed fucking constantly. So we have Ed Sanders and Tuli on vocals. Steve Weber is still hanging in there. They added a proper lead guitar player named Vinnie Leary, who kind of does most of the, plays the leads and stuff. A guy by the name of John Anderson on bass, and Ken Weaver is now firmly the drummer and not just playing congas. On that day, they recorded, and this is exclusive to the Virgin Fugs release, I Command the House of the Devil. And then a bonus track on the first album, I Saw the Best Minds of My Generation Rock. And then making the album, the bulk of the album was recorded on this day. We have Slum Goddess, Ah Sunflower, Weary of Time, Supergirl, I Couldn't Get High, How Sweet I Roamed from Field to Field, Carpe Diem, and of course, Boobs a Lot. So that's 2 videos in a row with songs about boobs. So that's kind of appropriate. There's 2, no, never mind. So yeah, so I guess we will talk about this. Wild, wild album. Now, the Fugs, you can see that here. The Fugs are a hard sell, and they're a hard sell for a lot of reasons. If the instrumentation, or no, if the musicianship doesn't make you say fuck this, the lead voices might. If the lead voices don't, the harmony vocals might. And if the harmony vocals don't, the gross out lyrics might. And if the gross out lyrics don't, the political lyrics might. So so yeah, there's kind of a barrier of entry to, or several layers of barrier to entry to enjoying the Fugs. And in fact, finding Fugs fans is very few and far between. I feel like I was particularly primed for getting into them because I was already into, like, you know, lo-fi indie bands and, you know, K Records stuff. Like, I was already into that, and I was already into people who couldn't really play all that well. So yeah, so I was, as far as like weird a cappella confrontational things, I was already well into Yoko Ono, and so, you know, I wasn't that put off by the Fugs. I could get on their wavelength. But for some people, you know, there is in Lester Banks's first book. Did I bring that down here? I didn't. I looked all through that first book, and I'm pretty sure he refers to the song, it was a Carpe Diem, as of a Wagnerian level of incompetence. But I couldn't find the exact quote because I wanted to quote. I found other passages where he talked about the Fugs. In Do the Gods Speak Esperanto? There's an extended passage about the Fugs. But God damn it, I could not find I could not find that exact quote. But it was something along those lines, and I remember laughing, like busting out laughing, because the first time I did hear this, you can't help but laugh at some of it because it is. It is fucked. It is the Fugs. The name of the band came from Tuli. It was a euphemism for fornication from the Norman Mailer novel The Naked and the Dead. So, but yeah, the like when you first when it first hits you, you know it. But again, it's they're more musical than the Shags. So if you can handle the Shags. And they're kind of about on the level of maybe early Beat Happening. Like, you know, so if you can roll with early Beat Happening, you should be able to handle the Fugs. And I think for Gross Out, if you can handle the Zappa, Flo and Eddie stuff, you can handle the Fugs. And as far as politics, if you can handle, you know, if you've listened to a rap record, if you can handle Public Enemy and NWA and Ice Cube and the Ghetto Boys and Ice-T, I can't imagine that the Fugs would particularly wrinkle up your forehead. Oh yeah, one other thing about Ed Sanders I should throw in, because you know, yeah, I feel like it's not relevant. Hold on one second. I have 2 copies of this, but I'm only seeing the one. I thought I had both of them next to each other, but Ed Sanders is the author of The Family. Probably the guy, what's it called? The Chaos book is really, really good, but a lot of that is still sort of unfounded in a lot of ways. This is the reissue. This is the reissue, the republishing, or a later edition. I actually have the OG copy of The Family, and I thought it was right over there, but it isn't. So, but this is, but this, Ed Sanders wrote this in 1970. When he wrote this, when he was working on this book, because he actually went and kind of lived with the Manson family while most of them were in prison, the ones who were still chilling at Spahn Ranch, Ed Sanders like kind of lived among them for a while. But when he was doing his research of this book and writing it, he was in the room next door to the Stooges when they were in L.A. recording Funhouse. So Ed Sanders and Iggy had a couple brief encounters. So, but this is the definitive tome on the Manson family, and Ed Sanders actually stuck with the case and befriended Doris Tate, and so Ed Sanders has never really left the world of Mansonia. Corresponded with Charlie in the 80s and 90s, got some pretty fucked up postcards from him that he details. So that's a great book. If you've never read a Manson book, skip Bugliosi and go straight to The Family, because that's the one. The Chaos book, is it Tom O'Neill? Is that his name? I don't think it is. The Chaos book is outstanding, but like I said, a lot of that is still a little it's just a shade too far into conspiracy world where all the dots aren't connected. That's not for lack of effort on his part, because I think that he has been at pains to connect the dots. But anyway, we're talking about books written decades after this music. So let us get into it. So side one: how does the first underground rock album ever made predate, I mean, everybody, the Velvets, Question Mark and the Mysterians, all of them. I think the MC5 were doing shows at this point, but they were I don't think they'd started writing their own songs yet. I think the MC5 were still primarily doing the Rolling Stones and like Troggs covers at this point. So and Zappa would have had Studio Z going, or maybe the very, very early beginnings of the Mothers. How does the first ever underground rock and roll album ever, how does it kick off? What does it start with? Well, it starts off with an absolutely joyous, beautiful, almost surf rock, or garage rock 60s song called Slum Goddess, written by Ken Weaver. And it is Vinny, what's the cat's name? See, I never really learned the names of the other people, sorry. But Vinny Leary's guitar is kind of the all-star, because he's the linchpin holding this all together and making it musical. Ken Weaver's drumming is very, very, very rudimentary, but it gets the job done. I mean, he's far better than the gal in the Shags. So, you know, but Slum Goddess is just, all these songs are really, really short. This is a 28-minute album. Slum Goddess is just an absolutely beautiful, joyous ode to an idealized woman. Beautiful. I love this song. And yes, so and kind of full band vocal harmonies. And yeah, the harmonies are rough. As Ed Sanders pointed out, they didn't have the polish of the Beach Boys. Boy, is that a... That's like saying that Ed Wood didn't have the polish of Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, that's what's not there, is the polish. However, they make it work. They somehow produce a group vocal sound that is just soaring and joyous and, weirdly, given how perverse these guys are, guileless. There's a weird, palpable innocence and just capturing a moment in time. You know, there is a feeling throughout this album of like being like 6 years old and running around in the park, or being on the swings at the like. That's what this album feels like, for as perverse and as perverted and as druggy as it gets. There is truly, truly palpable, childlike, guileless, innocent, explorative, the world is wide open joy to this. So that's how but though what's funny is, I mean this is 1965 lyrics. Fucking Ken Weaver's like the first time that we bawled. Now I know that Little Richard had sung that in the 50s, but this is more pronounced and more explicitly stated and more obvious. So yeah, but it is just a absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous song. I love Slum Goddess. And then we get into Ed Sanders' first contribution, Ah Sunflower Weary of Time, adopted from a William Blake poem. It's a William Blake poem, so the lyrics are, the poem is beautiful and, stunning. And we sort of go from running around in a field on a bright sunny day. This is shadowy and darker. This is more nighttime, intimate. There's lots of technical mishaps because they were just recording live. They were just, as Sanders points out in one of his essays, the Fugs were just pointed at microphones and told to play or told to sing, and that's just what they did. So this is, and kind of one of the features of this, because of the rudimentary drumming, the kind of unga boonga percussion. And yes, there are missed vocal cues, and yes, the harmonies waver. And yes, like on some of the songs with more pronounced electric guitar, there are moments where the guitar player clearly should start playing, or where the band fucked up and sped up and slowed down, so they wait to get back in tempo with each other before they go into the next part. But that's part of the ramshackle charm and beauty and honesty of the Fugs, the expressiveness of the Fugs. And Ah Sunflower Weary of Time, if you can handle the weird wavering harmonies, it is beautiful, and it does create an atmosphere, and it does put you in a time and place. And I find it very, very moving. So Sanders mostly adapts existing poems to music on this. It really isn't. Some of the other songs from these sessions, but really it's not until the second album that Sanders does a little bit more of his own, just straight up lyric writing. And then we get the first song by Tuli, Supergirl. So we first fuck. Is it the first fuck ever on a rock and roll record? It very well could be, predating the end. But again, weirdly beautiful and joyous. Just a great little up-tempo garage rock song. It's really charming. Again, for a song as libidinal and with such explicit language, another beautiful idealized woman, another song of sort of hope for the future and hope of love for the future. This is not po-faced, bloody-minded, didactic exhortations aimed at an audience they perceive as dumb. So it's again another beautiful, beautiful song. And again, wonky harmonies, deal with it. It's the sound. To me, it's the sound of people singing. It's a beautiful thing. I don't have a problem with it. And yeah, there's a few moments where the rhythm goes a bit off. That's you can handle it. And just I think it's Stampfel at the end. Again, another little charming moment to the up and away. Like, I love it. It's beautiful. Like, yeah, they're perverts, and they're countercultural radicals, but they're also charming romantic goofballs. And I love that. And I love that they're just that fearless. They're not trying to present anything like, oh, we're intimidating and like and hard. Like, no, they're just kind of everything. They're everything all at once. They're the Fugs. We get into now. This is like this could be a point where people fucking turn this thing off. The Swinburne Stomp. This Swinburne from the first session. I want to say it is. Yeah, Swinburne Stomp is that's the. So the first three songs are from the second session, which I almost kind of wished that they had been a little bit more purist and just made an album out of the first session. But to be perfectly honest, while they could have made a banging EP, or maybe some great singles out of that, I don't think that there was necessary. Even though it's 23 songs, I don't know that there's quite a full album there. But the jumps from the second session to the first session are a little weird. So there is part of me. I have a mix of a CDR of just the first session and then the second session that I've listened to, and I enjoy that for what it is. But Swinburne Stomp is rough. They're playing fucking slide whistles. There's like a my God, it is some of the most fucked music that you'll ever hear, and it's a poem by Charles Swinburne, so this is very much an Ed Sanders piece. Ed Sanders is sort of a chanting, declamatory scream, and it's kind of sea shanty sort of stuff. It's rough going. It's rough. That being said, the poem is amazing, and if you can kind of get on its wavelength, it's like a demented version of, if you've ever heard the Doors outtake, the Whiskey Mystics and Men. Is that the song? If it's kind of like, it's kind of it's sort of an melodic, kind of non-musical version of that. I still can very much appreciate it for what it is, but it is the toughest going, I would say, on this album. And then side one ends with Ken Weaver pulling it together. This is just a great absurdist hippie satire masterpiece, but is also kind of a cool, dark mid-60s proto-Doors rock song, or Proto Mothers, but Zappa was never going to have this. Well, maybe Zappa would, but it would be more obviously anti-drug. There's no way the Doors would have written this song, and that is, of course, "I Couldn't Get High," which recounts the tragic night of a hippie trying every form of intoxicant that they can get their grubby little unwashed hands on, and nothing works. And Ken Weaver gets more and more exasperated as he fails to reach any level of intoxication. And it is the vocal harmonies really work. Again, it's like, it's weirdly atmospheric. It has that kind of dark sense of place and time that some of the best mid-60s music does, where it is evocative of a mood, and you can almost kind of see the room that they're recording in, or you can see the streets that they would walk on, or imagine exactly what it would look like. So yeah, it's a very funny song, very silly, very absurd, but wonderful, and I love the song. Like, magnificent stuff. And that's kind of what Ken Weaver, that's kind of what he brings to the band. Like, he brings more kind of fully written songs, because Tuli, as great as Tuli is, Sanders is untutored but trying to be a songwriter. Tuli is just sort of intoning, like the sort of the purity of what Tuli does, also means that it's not necessarily musical or songwriterly, whereas Ken Weaver can actually just write these great little songs, So again, that range, the tripod, is very, very important. So then we flip the record over. All right, so we flip the record over, and side two begins with another Sanders adaptation of a William Blake poem, "How Sweet I Roamed from Field to Field." And this is from the second session. There is a lightly amplified acoustic guitar. It's electric guitar, kind of played like it's an acoustic, but and this is absolutely beautiful. It's written by William Blake, so poetry doesn't get that much better. But it's a tragic tale, and sung. This very much has, and I didn't sort of allude to this already enough, but produced by Harry Smith, this absolutely has the feel, and some of the stuff on side one does too, but this especially really has the feel of field recordings and some of the wilder stuff on the American Anthology of Folk Music, especially by the time you get into the part three, where it really starts getting more atonal and the voices are more intense and untutored. But this is, the vocal harmony, I don't know who's doing the high harmony on this. If I had if I had a blindfold on me, I would think that it was Stampfel, but he was out of the band by this point. So I'm not really sure who that is. Maybe it's Weaver. Maybe it could be either of the guitar players. I truly don't know. But it is, even with the missed vocal cues between Sanders and whoever he's harmonizing with, and even with the very, very wavering harmonies, I think it's absolutely beautiful and very moving, and I think they could have done 100 takes of this and not improved upon it. I think there's a believability and intensity to what is being portrayed in the lyric, and it's just, I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And I love that Sanders adapted two William Blake poems into songs. I think that's really, really cool, and it is great fodder for songwriting material. So we have a beautiful, beautiful start to side two, and sure, it's maybe not classically beautiful, or it's maybe not penetrating, emotionally evocative Everly Brothers harmonies or something, but it is beautiful in its own way, and especially if you can sort of get yourself to hear it. I absolutely love it. I've always loved it. And then we get to Carpe Diem. This is all Tuli. This is one of Tuli's masterpieces. So Tuli has sort of two epics on side two that are like that. If the rest of the album was terrible, or if they had chosen very different songs, given that they had recorded so much, these two would just make the album, as far as I'm concerned. So we have Carpe Diem, and before we get into the song, I will talk about Carpe Diem. The Fugs, and we'll get into this. This will come up in the second video. The Fugs re-recorded this song, I guess when the brief period where they were auditioning or about to be on Atlantic Records, and it is a more straightforward, somewhat more rock-oriented or rock ballad-oriented take, and that is what I believe that version is what the Melvins base their cover of this song on. Carpe Diem is, to me, where, like, as much as I love side one, and as much as I love the songs on side one, and as much as I think that it's great, I would think the only thing that isn't super successful is Swinburne's Stomp, which it is, because again, it prefigures a lot of noise, freak out indie stuff, and it very much prefigures like a lot of like the first half Japanese album, and like, so there's a lot, what to me is the least successful song is still great, right? but Carpe Diem is where everything to me goes up a level, and where it gets serious. So this is just, the high vocal harmony is a little rough. I will be honest. And Oonga Boonga, I mean, this is like maximum Oonga Boonga drums. And, at first you hear the Oonga Boonga drums and you hear that Carpe Diem, like that coming through at you. And I get why Lester Bangs would call it a Wagnerian level of incompetence. I get that. And yes, again, there's like when they try to do transitions, they all manage to miss it at slightly different times. So it's like the most possible, like, of something going wrong musically, it goes wrong in like the most extreme possible fashion, and then then they have to like rebalance themselves. And yet, who gives a shit? You get past the vocal harmony. I'm fine with Oonga Boonga drums. Like that's fine. That's all I can do on a drum set. All I can do is boom 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 boom. Like that's fine. So I have no physical ability to incorporate a bass drum and hit a snare. Like I am very discombobulated in that way. So I wish I could. That'd be awesome. But so anyway, the song the weird wonky vocal harmonies, it actually becomes kind of a beautiful, rough symphony of long droning voices, and it's fucking serious stuff. It's a song about death. It's a song about life in the face of death, and yet towards the end, they throw in it's an old cliche, but you better make your love today. It's and as Tuli's widow herself pointed out, like there is love in the song. So even in a song that's focused on death, there's love. One of her big problems with the Melvins is that they focus on the death, which whatever. It's come on. So it's very silly. But it is just it's absolutely magnificent. And it's just 5.5 or whatever 5 and a bit minutes of just long, rolling, droning tones, vocal tones, basically, and it's just this elongated, chant that feels ceremonial or feels prayer-like. It's amazing, and yes, it's rough, and yes, they all sort of fuck up at slightly different times. Who fucking cares? Because again, if they had recorded it, if they had done another take 10 minutes later, it wouldn't have the magic of this. And giving it a steadier, giving it different musicians and steadier instrumentation and more conventional instrumentation did not make for a better version, making it better produced, whatever. Like, this is it. This is the real expression. And they are, they could be anything. They could be sailors on a ship. It's some sort of deviant people's choir. It's who knows, but I don't know. They appear almost, they certainly appear sage-like and ancient and wise beyond their years, and coming, this Carpe Diem feels like it could be 100 years old, and it could be around 100 years from now. It could be a field recording. It could be fucking anything. It could have been recorded in Europe in the 20s. Who knows? It's absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I love Carpe Diem. I think it's an epic masterpiece, or a mini epic masterpiece, and it's, it's Tuli. It's what Tuli does, and it's Tuli at his greatest, and at his most human, and at his most expressive. Magnificent. So then we go, oh, and I was wrong. So yeah, Ed Sanders does have a song that he just wrote straight up, start to finish. and that is My Baby Done Left Me, which got retitled on the reissue with its sort of tagline, I feel like homemade shit. But My Baby Done Left Me is a much better title for the song, I think. And it's a country song, or a mock country song, but it really feels like field recording stuff. It could be on some sort of collection of bawdy songs, when you would see, like, when you get like collections of bawdy songs, and there's like Barnacle Bill the Sailor, or Cocksucker's Ball, or any of those sorts of things. It could be like it's like a field recording bawdy song. And again, I think just like with Carpe Diem or Swinburne Stomp, or I think the High Harmony, whoever the hell's doing that, I think can be a possible barrier to entry. The yodeling. This would have to have been from the first session, right? Is it? Fucking hell. Yeah, of course. It's very much first session. So maybe that's probably Stampfel then on the with the yodeling. But if you kind of get past it and you get into the song and you're off and running, there's some pretty wild shit in there. There's the offhand aside about he's so broken up that Claire June has been seen around town with another man that he's so put out he's given up heifer fucking. That's how despondent he is, and feels like homemade shit. I once sang this song just off for no apropos of nothing, and boy does my wife not like this song. But yeah, it's the thing is, it's basically a bawdier, more fully fleshed out, more authentically fucked, standing in the field fucking version of the Stones' Dear Doctor. So if you can roll along with the loose, rough-hewn, sort of hillbilly, despondent hillbilly thing of Dear Doctor, this is the rawer version of that. So yeah, like, I love My Baby Done Left Me, and the group singing, because it's all, that's the thing with these songs on side 2, and that's part of the reason the album is so well sequenced. I didn't mention, when the 2 recording sessions were done, Harry Smith and Ed Sanders took an afternoon and they cut all the tapes down and assembled the album out of that. So it's the 2 of them making the decisions. And the sequencing is brilliant, because they're just the full-throated, unself-conscious, because, like, I think that's the thing that slightly undoes Swinburne Stomp for me, is there's a slight amount of hesitancy in Ed Sanders' voice, and just a little bit of hesitation or self-consciousness or whatever. And, like, there's just none of that on side 2. It's just full-throated and just bellowing. These guys are just lost in the moment and just fully expressive and unself-conscious about it. It's a wonderful, wonderful song. As sort of, as unconventional as it is. It's magnificent. And then Steve Weber. So Steve Weber, who was not long for the band, there he is, and he looks really cool in the one band photo. Look at that guy. Doesn't that guy look? I don't know if you can see that. Doesn't that guy look awesome? So anyway, that's Stampfel, by the way, and Weaver, Tuli, and then Ed Sanders over here. That's a different photo. So Steve Weber, his only songwriting credit on the record, comes off the bench hard with the absolute masterpiece, Boobs a Lot. One of the silliest, again, joyous, and to have this song tucked away on side 2, tying back to Supergirl and Slum Goddess and I Couldn't Get High, like those 4 songs are just this great raw garage rock, you know, just guys in a room playing. They're not that great at their instruments, but there's just such life to it, and they're just clearly having so much fun, and just the kind of soaring backing vocals of just, you know, just like they're again lost in the moment. Boobs a Lot is, I think under the surface it's like sort of a social commentary song about like jock guys, but it's just so there's some level of social commentary. It's not really about boobs, it's about guys, I guess, who like boobs a lot, so you could read possible sexual taboos into that, that maybe this is a song for people who don't like boobs a lot, whatever. But you could take it on the surface. But I think it's Weaver, during the outro, as great and silly and fun and wonderful and joyous but goofy as the song is, during the outro, everybody's sort of taking turns at the mic, and I'd want to say it's Weaver. I don't know if it is or not, but I think it's Ken Weaver, who kind of steals the show with a classic comedy rule of three of total deadpan. I like something. What else would I like if I didn't like boobs a lot? And then, of course, I sure like boobs. Magnificent. It gets me every time. There's never been a time where I haven't laughed at that, including right now. And then we end with Tuli's. We wrap this album up with the absolute magnificent, the ultimate is, I'm going to say, cantillation. We'll see if I'm using that word right or not. We'll find out if I'm using it right or if I'm just some misinformed shagus. There, I know that word. So I once used that word. There was a guy who mistook me for being Jewish, and I said, "Oh no, I'm a shagus." And he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't use that word to describe yourself." And then he tried to talk me into converting, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm probably not going to convert, but like it's very nice of you to give it a shot." So anyway, but we get to the epic closer of the album. It's not really that epic. It's 4 minutes, but on an album of songs that barely make it to 2 minutes, it's an epic. Nothing. The sort of postmodern statement. Nothing. And it's largely a back and forth between Tuli and Ed Sanders. They kind of swap off what I would have to imagine are mostly extemporized verses. There is a snippet of Tuli coming up with sort of the main vocal part on one of the Rhapsody of Tuli a cappella composing tape things, sound collages. We'll talk about those in the second video. But this is Tuli's epic. It is, and this goes to me even further than Carpe Diem. As much as I love Carpe Diem, and I do, this is then even more impressive. It's because now the voices, there's no high harmonies, there's no like they're all down here, and it's just the whatever the group of them, because this would have been. So this would have been first session. So it would have been what, the 5 guys, and it's absolutely magnificent. Again, it feels, it feels like some sort of ritualistic incantation, and it takes on its own weird power and its own weird level of seriousness, even when you have Ed Sanders. Because Sanders sort of, I think, is, Ed Sanders is always sort of thinking on some level in the back of his mind, I would have to imagine, is thinking relatability to some degree. So Ed Sanders is the one who throws in the more sort of contemporary, like, Village Voice and, like, or going for the, like, fucking, nothing, sucking, like he sort of, he goes more in that direction, but even then, it doesn't take away from the seriousness. And and Tuli, again, the sort of contrast of this feeling ancient and like it has always existed, and having this weird cast iron power to it, but then throwing in the ironic commentary of like, the world's great book's a great set of nothing, like just like mocking advertisements. Like it's brilliant, and throws in a critique of Russia. It's just it's absolutely magnificent, and it is this weird sort of not explosive, but summoning up of some very serious. I don't want to say dark. Just I'll say serious sort of ancient power coming through these guys one afternoon in April of 1965. Like they sort of latch on to something and just ride that out, and it's a magnificent statement. It's the only way the album could end. It's incredible. I love it. I've always loved it, and I can really get lost. It's one of those things like you could really get lost in it, and it's one of those things that feels like it's 10 minutes, and it's hard to believe that it's only 4 minutes because you really go into the world of it. And and Tuli sort of wraps things up with a under his breath as the song is coming to an end. Lots of it, nothing, and then not a goddamn thing. That's like the last you hear, and it's just it's amazing. It's amazing, and a beautiful end to a loose, raw, unconventional album. It's the first underground album ever made. So there was nothing else like this. There was nothing to compare this to. They were the first. They were roaming from field to field. So a great album, a truly great album, and if you can get past its barriers of entry, there's so much to love about it, and so much to listen to, and so much to revel in, and so much to think about. So it's great. Now, and I've always loved it. Now, we shall get into the voluminous number of outtakes and alternate takes. Not too many alternate takes, mostly just songs they didn't use. The range of quality is not good at all to fucking genius. So it is the it's the full range. But we will get to that right now. The rest of the Fugs oeuvre from 1965, as I had said before, is split out from bonus tracks on this album to the what would be their next record label, or because this was reissued as the Fugs' first album by ESP. This ESP bootleg release, but it was like a bootleg that came out in '67 called Virgin Fugs. And then, of course, the epic Don't Stop box set from 2008. So let us get into the bonus tracks, and or the additional 1965 material, some of which is some of the very best material that the Fugs ever recorded. So the fact that it is split out is slightly frustrating, because on the other hand, would it have made sense on the album? I don't know that it would have. I think it would have changed the character of the album, but certainly you could have had an EP or singles, or just another standalone album, perhaps. I don't know. So let us get into it. So we'll start with the bonus tracks on here. So this is all stuff from the first session. So this is the April 65 session. The first song is by Ed Sanders, and that is their theme song, We're the Fugs. So predating Hey Hey We're the Monkeys, or any, We're the Fugs is just, how short is it? It's minute 25. It is just a great, indelible, funny song. It's in the intro. I referenced one of the lyrics. We eat pussy, we ain't fussy. It is a drug and sex obsessed song. It's very funny and very silly, but also just fucking great, and just the ramshackle, excitable vibe is wonderful, and yeah, it's just it's a beautiful moment in time, and I would imagine it's Tuli and Sanders on co-lead vocal. It's a glorious sort of little burst of a song, and I don't know how. It delineates their interests in chemicals, sex, and that they are self-consciously artists, and that they are anti-war, but not in any sort of arch way. This is what they are, and I've always loved the song. So yeah, and then the next song is Tuli Kupferberg masterpiece. One of my favorite songs ever recorded by anybody, and that is Defeated. This is one of their most essential songs, and an absolutely brilliant song. And if Tuli's stuff on most of his stuff on the first album feel like these sort of ancient, droning, almost not religious, but like, something that would be sung in some sort of mass. I don't know. An outsider mass. This is almost like a children's song, but like a really like demented children's song. But it is just a delineation of somebody through kind of getting the worst of American life. And again, I mean, sort of shockingly confrontational lyrics for 1965, or any. I mean, or any. So I mean, it's right up there. I mean, it's right up there with Lenny Bruce and Allen Ginsberg. But in a songwriting context, it's still, I think, even now, it's even, post gangster rap and whatever. I think it's still kind of. I think some of it is still pretty jarring, in a great way. But it is just such a brutal, brilliant distillation, and such a great piece of social commentary. I have always loved it, and having gone to a repressive Catholic high school, never having been Catholic in my life, I used to bellow this song down the hallway on particularly lousy days. 17-year-old me could be heard, defeated, I know why I'm defeated. And then I would, point at people, and you are defeated too. and so I used to just bellow this song out, loudly and as obnoxiously as possible. So I have wonderful memories of annoying the shit out of kids in my high school, just blurting this song as loud as I possibly could at them. So I've always loved this song. It's one of their greatest. It's one of my favorite songs by anyone. And then another Tuli epic. This one more. It doesn't get more ancient than this. The Ten Commandments, a co-write between Tuli and God Almighty. It is the Ten Commandments put to song, with just kind of an absurd anti-vocal harmony refrain build up, that almost is like, if it had like electric instrumentation or any sort of conventional playing during the verses, it could almost be like a dance craze song or like the Twist or something, which we know from the composing tapes, which we'll get to in the next video. Tuli was self-consciously trying to write something like that. So, but it's just, you know, and again, the wild and loose fucking approach to harmony singing, primitive, I think. Primitive is the word. But it's fucking awesome, and it's the Ten Commandments. I mean, it's fucking great, and I have always loved it. And then finally, the fourth song from the first session, CIA Man. Is CIA Man another Tuli soul writing credit? Yes, it is. That's what I thought. So, CIA Man apparently was used, and I don't remember the movie, but apparently it is used in a Coen Brothers movie. At some point in the last 20 years, it was used in a Coen Brothers movie. Don't remember which one. But Bob Dylan recently... so Bob Dylan, interestingly, referenced the Fugs in a 1966 interview. Was it an interview with... Was it Bob Fass? I forget now. It's some. At one time it might have been since been pulled, but at one point it was up on YouTube, and he fucking references the Fugs, and he specifically references, I believe, Tuli. It's been a long time since I heard it, but it was pretty cool that Bob knew about the Fugs, and jump forward to this past year. And Bob dedicated an entry to CIA Man in his book, The Philosophy of Modern Song. And it's a short write-up. I actually wish he would have spent more time on it. But it's cool that the song got its due. And so when people were making playlists of all the songs, the song got some more attention, which it absolutely deserves. I think that it is just an absolutely brilliant, sharp piece of agitprop. I think it's as good as anything that was contemporary at the time from somebody like Phil Oakes. And I think it's as good as anything the Dead Kennedys wrote. I think it's as good as anything that Chuck D would later write. It's probably better than, no offense to them, as I'm a fan, but it's probably better than anything the Millions of Dead Cops did. It's a, like I said, it is a fantastic piece of agitprop that in its own way is really far reaching and very prescient, because Vietnam was just really starting to amp up. So, Tuli clocked that one really early, and it is absolutely fantastic. I mean, he clocked the not just the ramp up of Vietnam really early, but Black Ops, all that stuff. He sussed it out, and just who's the agency well known to God, the one who copped his staff and copped his rod. I love that. Like, it's just great, sharp lyrics. And what's interesting is, again, the vocal harmonies on this really, really work. And I would have to imagine that Stampfel kind of going off on his own, but the droning CIA, like, all the little parts work in absolute perfect kind of unison with each other. And it's just a great little acoustic, pointed, and yet somehow macrocosmic political song, and Tuli wrote the hell out of it. So there's a reason he's kind of my favorite member. He's basically my favorite member of the band, because Weaver wasn't going to write something like that, and I feel like Sanders might have. I don't know that Sanders could have put in the macrocosmic touches that Tuli does. Nothing against Ed, who I love and who's a great writer in his own right, but there was something very, very special about Tuli, and just so unique. And there really isn't anybody else like him, as if I haven't made that clear already. So So that is the 4 songs from the first session on here. From there, we go into, I guess technically a 5th song. In the middle of their first recording session, the Fugs signed the worst contract since Leadbelly's. So that is Ed Sanders and Petito, and that is audio verite from the first recording session with, I read somewhere, I don't remember where I saw this, but this with sound effects added in 1990. So they pulled out a 2-second sample of somebody saying "sign it" and tape loop that, and then they put in like faux orchestral, like kind of almost like Godardian interruptive device orchestral music, and basically it's the Fugs discussing the terms of their recording contract and then being kind of coerced into signing this recording contract while they are recording. So, it's not really a song. It's interesting. It's not necessarily something that I would particularly listen to very often. We'll skip that. Oh, and then we will get to the, from February of 1965, the spontaneous salute to Andy Warhol. So this was recorded at a rehearsal at the Peaside Bookstore. It is a minute and a half of just sort of a droning. It sounds like a, what do you call it? A harmonium and Tuli intoning Warhol, and that's it. Like there's not that much to it. In 1965, the Fugs had a concert, and it's just 1965. So somewhere, I believe it's because I think it was between the first and second recording sessions. The Fugs did a concert at the Bridge Theater on St. Mark's Place, and it was called the Night of Napalm. So it was a protest against the Vietnam War. There are 3 songs from that on here. The first of which is War Kills Babies, which is another sort of, it's very short, but it's sort of a drone piece. Then the Fugs National Anthem, which is, they have a recording of the national anthem playing, and then they're reading a subverted version of "I Think I Shall Never See Something as Beautiful as a Tree" over that. And just like a performance art piece. And then the most song-like thing here, which really is a kind of another dirge intonation piece, which is credited to Ed Sanders, but feels very Tuli. So, but it is titled here, "The Fugs Spaghetti Death, brackets, no redemption, dash, a glop of spaghetti for Andy Warhol." They were hurling spaghetti out at the audience, in sort of an early performance art version of "Bring the War Home," and they apparently threw some at Andy Warhol. So I just knocked a piece of paper over. So it's perfectly fine for what it is. These are pretty rough sounding. I mean, this is like the lowest of lo-fi, but you get a glimpse of the Fugs at their most chaotic, at their most confrontational, and not at all eager to please the audience. So very much kind of prefiguring whatever you would call not just punk, but shock rock or whatever. But that it has a point and purpose to it. It's not just purely upsetting people for the sake of it. And so that is, with the exception of the Rhapsody of Tuli, that is it for the bonus material on here. And we shall now jog on over to the bonus material from the Virgin Fugs. So Virgin Fugs was released by ESP, the Fugs second label, in 1967. And I do love the album cover. That's a great album cover. Quasi bootleg release. ESP was not the most above board label, shall we say. And apparently, whether I've read conflicting accounts whether they were connected to legitimate businessmen, or if the legitimate businessmen basically showed up and said, "Nice business you got here. We're gonna print some records on our own." Like I said, I've read that they were strong armed into it. I have read conflicting accounts, but apparently, at some point, the legitimate businessmen, I don't know what's wrong with my eye, got involved. So anyway, so out comes this. This is after the Fugs had left for, I don't know if this came out during the gray period where they were on off Atlantic, or whether they had, from when they had signed to Reprise. But it is a combination of the two sessions that made up the first album. So there are some redundancies with the bonus tracks, because like I said, all these things have come out many times since. So, so it starts off with We're the Fugs, which we already talked about. Then we have the Pete Stampfel song, New Amphetamine Shriek, which would have been from the first session. It's a funny hippie satire about, drug psychosis. I Couldn't Get High, I think, is a far superior song, but it's perfectly fine. It's sung in a overly comical voice, which is, I don't know. And I think the playing it straight vocal approach of I Couldn't Get High and treating it like it's this horrible tragedy is far funnier, as opposed to a goofy, like that, But what I do appreciate, again, the primitive anarchy of the Fugs, is that so the song is New Amphetamine Shriek. There are multiple vocal shrieking solos that sort of comprise the song's chorus. So you just have all of them, and so that, it's a tribute to the wildness of the early Fugs. Then we have a Sanders gross out Saran wrap. That's a thing from the previous generation. I first heard of that in Matt Groening's Life in Hell comic, which I think I got that book when I was 11 or 12, where they referred to using a piece of Saran wrap as a condom, and it was known as doing it lunch style, apparently. So Saran wrap, it's funny. I don't know. It's kind of puerile. I can see why they didn't use it. Not much to say beyond that. I mean, it's a minute 18. Then we have the Ten Commandments, which we already talked about. And then we have the Tuli song, Hallucination Horrors. Again, it's another sort of drug song. A few eyebrow-raising lyrics that would get him in all sorts of trouble these days. Again, there's not that much to... There's not that much to really say about it. It's better than New Amphetamine Shriek. I don't know. It's fine. Not that much to say about it. And then from the second album sessions. So there's two songs from the second album sessions. One was already a bonus track on here, but I skipped it so I could talk about both songs in one place. And that is, and this is Sanders, right? Yeah. So this is Ed Sanders. This is the best song that he's written up to this point. Why it only has ever been released here and did not come out on the box set or as a bonus track, I have no idea. And that is, excuse me, I Command the House of the Devil. This is a creepy, fascinating rock and roll song, shadowy, just dark and spooky, and amazing lyrics. It's social commentary, but in the dark, occultic, metaphysical realm. It is basically it accomplishes it's a pre celebration of the lizard, or pre not to touch the earth portion of celebration of the lizard. It's interesting that Ed Sanders and Jim Morrison were operating in in very close proximity out in the collective subconscious, because I can't imagine Jim would have been influenced by this, because he already would have had this written. So pretty amazing. And it is an absolutely magnificent song, and absolutely magnificent piece of writing, and the Fugs really nail it. Again, in their own primitive, anarchic way, but boy, they fucking create a mood and sustain it. It's a magnificent song, and I absolutely love it. So, and it's only found here. So then we have CIA Man, and then we have another. Is this a Sanders? Because it has to be. Oh no, it's a Tuli. Okay. Coca-Cola, another minute and a half novelty number. Coca-Cola douche. It's right up there or down there with Saran wrap. I don't know. I mean, there's a couple funny lines in it, but like her pussy's got the caffeine shakes is funny, I guess. I don't know. It's not really. There's a certain thing now in the last several years, there's a whole thing of, that didn't age well, usually meaning that's something you can't or shouldn't say. But some things don't age well just because I think the cultural context is sort of gone, and I feel like when talking to people younger than me, some of the harsher, more kind of brutally cynical humor of my generation is sort of lost on them. I would have to imagine 20 years from now, a lot of their goofy meme humor will be utterly lost. And I think there are just some things that just don't carry over just contextually. And I think this sort of gross out sex stuff that especially Zappa was particularly fond of, and the sort of locker room humor, I think, coming out of the 50s and, into the 60s, I get why there was the reaction to that. And, there used to be pages and pages of that stuff in Playboy, or even like Hustler or whatever. And I think if you came out of the 50s or early 60s, I kind of get it, but, or just, I don't know. It doesn't really do that much for me. And certainly isn't anywhere near as funny as I Couldn't Get High or Boobs a Lot. So, or some of the stuff that they would subsequently do. So yeah, I think they chose well when they were choosing the humorous songs. And then, goddamn, this has to be Tuli, right? Yeah. So my bed is getting crowded. An ode to wife swapping, or philandering, or having an open marriage. It's fine. It's silly. I don't know. It's a joke. It's a joke, champ, as the great Jack Grisham once said. Again, I don't know. Doesn't really do much for me. Certainly not the heights from the session of CIA Man or Defeated, or some of those songs on the first album of Tuli's. It's fine. And then the truly this is kind of the bottom of the barrel. The anal expulsive, literally cock-a-rocka. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to say about this. There is a song out on YouTube, and years ago when you would search for the Fugs on YouTube, this song was the most popular Fugs song, and that was something called I Shit My Pants. That was a parody of Chris Montez's, is it Chris Montez, is that his name? Let's Dance. I think it's something Montez. I might be wrong about the first name, but the great early rock and roll song, and it's terribly unfunny, but it's not the Fugs. It's not a Fugs recording, and the comment section is, makes that abundantly clear. I don't know. This is honestly not that much better or not that much funnier. It just isn't funny, and so kind of a number of lowlights on this, and I get why the Fugs were sour on this release, though it doesn't clear up the mystery of why I Command the House of the Devil wasn't used elsewhere, because they did use CIA Man and We're the Fugs, etc. So who knows? But then things close out with the other song from the second session, along with I Command the House of the Devil, and that is I Saw the Best Minds of My Generation Rock, which I think my generation and younger would misunderstand the title. The title is not I Saw the Best Minds of My Generation Rock. It's like the Jingle Bell Rock or the whatever, like the whatever rock, like instead of like waltz or, So it's I saw the Best Minds of My Generation Rock. And what they did is they took Allen Ginsberg's masterpiece, eternal masterpiece, Howl, and turned it into a rock and roll song. And it is kind of shades of Dylan's Mixed Up Confusion. It's fucking amazing. I love it. It's taken at a very brisk pace, and Ken Weaver does lose the beat a little here and there. He's not the greatest drummer in the world, but and they're all sort of taking turns on the vocals. So there's sort of the opening section, then it goes into, it sort of drifts into, it sort of loses itself a little, and then re-corrals itself into the chants and screams and the uprushing mania of holy, 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 and the Moloch section, like. So it's quietly ambitious because it basically has like 3 sections, and it sort of is weirdly moving. Because they somehow took little excerpts of this incredible poetic masterpiece, visionary masterpiece, epic of Howl, and fashioned a song out of it. They trimmed it down into a song, and it really works. And it's not a reduction of this great work of art. It's a whole different way of hearing it and thinking about it and experiencing it. So, in my perfect world, I Saw the Best Minds of My Generation Rock would be a standalone single with I Command the House of the Devil as the B-side. That would be like one of the best singles of the 60s, I think, because I Command the House of the Devil is like an ultimate sort of B-side, And those 2 songs would complement each other perfectly. That you have this surge into the unknown, and then you have like the results of the unknown on the B-side. So in my perfect world, that's like an imaginary single that never was but should have been. So that is it for the Virgin Fugs. Not the greatest release in the world, but I would strongly recommend seeking out the one song, and you can get I Saw the Best Minds of My Generation Rock on here. In 1975, reputable record label ESP went to the Fugs trough yet again and released the utterly baffling release Fugs 4 Rounder's Score, which has hideous cover art. I might throw it up. We'll see if I can be bothered to do that. Oh God, what the fuck is the point? I've never seen a copy. I don't care to obtain a copy. Most of the songs are either stuff recycled from the first album, and then outtakes. Now, here's the thing with the outtakes. The outtakes are basically Pete Stampfel on fiddle and Ken Weaver on acoustic guitar. No other Fugs are singing on them, by and large, other than New Amphetamine Shriek. So they're basically considered Holy Modal Rounders songs. So they're part of the 23 that was recorded for the first album, or the first session. But I don't really feel that, like, discussing them really does feel like it's outside the Fugs. Ed Sanders doesn't really seem to consider them Fugs recordings, and doesn't reference them. They've never been issued anywhere else. So nothing against Pete Stampfel, but so we'll just run through the track listing really quick. So we've got Boobs a Lot from first album. Romping Through the Swamp is a Pete Stampfel song. It's fine. Then we've got Defeated. Crowley Waltz is a traditional. It's an instrumental on fiddle. It's really, is it an instrumental? Now I'm forgetting. At any rate, you can tell how many times I've listened to this thing. Fiddler a Dram, though, is an old folk song. Birds did a really great version of it. Lots of people have done it. Stampfel sounds great. It's really, really good. Fishing Blues is another folk song. It's perfectly fine, you know. New Amphetamine Shriek, already covered that. This is an alternate take. The one song of interest, if you really want to complete things, is Tuli's Jack Off Blues. Jack Off Blues is far better than Cock-a-Rocka or The Bed's Getting Crowded. It is a, like, legitimate blues song. So it's interesting to hear Tuli sing that and sing in a more conventionally melodic blues idiom. And it's cleverer and funnier and has a little bit of emotional depth. I mean, it's still Jack Off Blues, but it at least portrays a scenario, and the humor is not just sort of goofball, gross out humor. So, is it a masterpiece? No. However, it should infinitely be on the Virgin Fugs or one of the outtakes things over some of that stuff. It's 1,000 times better than Coca-Cola Douche or Cock-a-Rocka or The Bed's Getting Crowded or Saran Wrap. So, for whatever that's worth. But the best of the not as good material, that's up to you. Then there more recycling of I Couldn't Get High and Slum Goddess. Cock-a-Rocka makes its now fucking second appearance. CIA Man, so the best against the worst, or the worst against the best. Kill for Peace from the second record is thrown on here, and then the Virgin Forest is cut down and thrown on here for some reason. Speaking of jack-off, what a jack-off release. My God. Inexplicable. Just fucking inexplicable. So, if you really want to be, if you really want to be completist, there you go. And then we get to 2008's outstanding box set, Don't Stop, Don't Stop. Now, disc 1 is just a ported over version of the reissue of the first album, bonus track for bonus track. Disc 2 is a ported over version of the second album, bonus track for bonus track. So there's that. The third disc is live stuff, most of which post-dates 1965 and 66. So at someday if I do the reprise era of the Fugs, I will just cover that then. I'm missing one or two songs that are from 65, 66, but you're just gonna have to deal with that. And then we have disc 4, which has some additional unreleased material. There are 5 versions of the song Nothing. The first of which is the unedited take from the first album. It's slightly longer, and it has like a little sort of intro piece that was cut off. I like it. I think it's really cool. I don't know that it's essential. Nothing on its own is more than enough, but if you want a little more Nothing, this is interesting and this is good. If you love the song, check this out, because this, by the way, you would have to search around for on the interwebs. I couldn't find any trace of it on YouTube. I don't know if it's on the other streaming services because I don't really pay attention, but it isn't on YouTube. It's not on... The Fugs kind of have an official channel. we're not dealing with vast numbers of people, so I don't really know who's running what or who's doing what. I really don't know. But yeah, so but the rest of these are from later on in the 60s. So again, at some point I will cover the reprise era, but that's not right now. Then there's a couple Ed Sanders demos from later on in the 60s. There's another cut together bunch of Tuli stuff, which again I will cover in the next video. So that whittles disc 4 down to 3 more songs from the first album, and this is all stuff from the first session. So there is an early version of Supergirl. The version from the second session is infinitely superior. It's interesting, but they got it right for the album. Sunflower, Weary of Time, again, they got it right for the album. And then a song of Tuli's, which is pretty funny. And again, why it wasn't on Virgin Fugs is kind of inexplicable. Why it is the last released song. Why it didn't make Fugs 4 Rounder's Score, whatever the fuck that shit is. It's why it's the last song released. I have no idea, because it's far, far, far better. Why Kakaraka has 2 releases and this only has 1, and this is not until 2008, is inexplicable. Again, is it anywhere near? I don't want to cloud the issue and say that this is on the level of Defeated or CIA Man or the 10 Commandments or We're the Fugs. I mean, those are the 4 absolute fucking classics that are not on the album and that are essential and you should absolutely listen to. But I'm Gonna Kill Myself Over Your Dead Body is again kind of like the Jack Off Blues. It's the best of sort of the B tier or C tier. Some of that is F tier material, but so, you know, is it worth hunting down? Sure. Why the hell not? You know, and if you wanted to be a completist and cobble all of that together and just listen to it as one thing, I've done that, and it's perfectly enjoyable. But yeah, that is basically a run through of all of that. And that kind of wraps up the Fugs in 1965. So here we are. And then in the next video, I will cover their second album and some of the other material that they recorded in '66. I will throw in a little spoiler right now. The Fugs transcend their primitive folk beatnik origins and actually inexplicably turn into a tight, hot, awesome, still very primitive and raw, brutally primitive and raw, but awesome rock and roll band. And the sort of the phenomenon of the Fugs of how raw and primitive they are, and Ed Sanders trying to make them a better band and make them more musical. Eventually, you know, so at this point they're still very, very, very raw, and the tension of trying to make them more musical ratchets them up one step from the first recording session to the second. But then it gets ratcheted up, and I would argue perfected on what becomes the second album. Then by the time they get to Reprise, I think it is perhaps too far in the, you know, in the opposite direction. They become too good at what they're doing and lose. Unfortunately, they lose a lot of what's really special about them. I still like the Reprise stuff, and I will cover that someday. But the '66. The album from '66 will be in the next video, and I really, really, really love that one. So it'll be a lot of fun to get into that, and it won't be nearly as long as this video because there just was a lot of context and a lot of setup. So at any rate, but yeah, this is an amazing, amazing album. It's a great piece of art. And I would argue that it really is for the ages. I love it, always have loved it. And if you have adventurous listening tastes, I would strongly recommend checking it out. Just know that you might be challenged by it, and if it's challenging in 2023, I cannot imagine what it would have sounded like in 1965. So the Fugs were truly ahead of their time. So, at any rate, hope you've enjoyed this. The next video will be getting filmed as soon as I can, as soon as I have time. But otherwise, I will see you in the next video, and thank you for watching. We've picked up a few more subscribers, so that's wonderful. So like and comment and subscribe and share and all that sort of stuff. And I will see you in the next video. So thank you very much for watching. See you next time, and bye.
You just finished watching Rich Talks Records. Now the anticipation